After my sister moved abroad, the three men who were obsessed with her turned to me to be her stand-in. The billionaire CEO bought me penthouses and luxury cars. The rebellious playboy held me close while singing love songs. The cold-blooded genius guided me through my thesis and prestigious competitions. I knew their kindness was never meant for me. It was all for my sister. I didn't let myself catch feelings. I simply worked hard at being a professional substitute until the day my sister returned to the States. The moment she landed, I vanished without a trace. Suddenly, they were the ones who could let go. I was my sister's shadow. After Juno left for London, the first person to hunt me down was Fulton Price. He took a drag from a cigarette and tossed a contract at me, like it was a piece of trash. "Sign it," he said, his voice cold. "I don't want to be the reason you are forced to drop out of college." I signed it without a second thought. The next was Jace Wilda. He pulled up to the diner where I worked, in a flashy orange Lamborghini, and dragged me out. He gripped my chin, staring at my face for a long time before muttering, "You really do look just like her. Do you want me to be her replacement?" I asked plainly. He chuckled, a dark glint in his eyes. "That works." The third was Silas Sterling. He never explicitly used the word stand-in, but after Juno left, he mentored me through my research and competitions, often dazing off while staring at my face. When people asked how I managed to land the most unreachable guy on campus, I had a simple answer: my face. It was all thanks to my sister's face. Aside from our looks, Juno and I were nothing alike. She was bold, radiant, and a force of nature. I was her polar opposite, Nira. Soft, manipulative little thing with a voice like honey. To be a better substitute, I tried to mimic her every move. The men weren't satisfied. Fulton sneered, calling my acting clumsy and boring. Jace laughed until he cried, thanking me for being the discount version. That provided him with so much entertainment. Silas would just stare at me in silence for a few seconds. Before calling me disgusting, I decided to rethink my strategy. The stand and market was getting competitive. And if I didn't upgrade my skills, my face alone wouldn't be enough. I noticed other girls were already getting plastic surgery to look like my sister. After a night of deep thought, I had an epiphany. They loved Juno and wanted her to love them back. But Juno was a career-driven queen who didn't care for romance. Me, I'd been a heartbreak since I was 12, and I knew exactly how to make men spin in circles. If they were missing love, I would give them a masterpiece of it. Now it is my second year as their shadow. Fulton called me over while I was at Jace's place, helping him level up in a video game. "Where are you?" Fulton asked. Jace was too immersed in the game to look my way, so I answered honestly, playing games at a friend's house. Fulton hung up and sent me an address. It was a newly opened art gallery. I rolled my eyes. Who goes to see art in the middle of the night? What a total. 7 iPhone buzzed with a notification. Venmo, you received $15,000 from Fulton Price. What a total masterpiece of an art connoisseur. Only a true genius would appreciate art at this hour. Just as I was celebrating, Jace pulled me into his lap. "Who was that?" he asked carelessly. "My dad won the lottery," I lied. "He wants me to come home and celebrate." Jace clearly didn't believe me, but he didn't press the issue. He kept his arm around me until the round ended. He wasn't easy to fool, though. As I headed for the door to put on my shoes, he spoke up. "Is it Silas?" I had the most overlap with Silas at school, so it made sense for Jace to suspect him. I nodded smoothly. "There is an issue with the lab data. I didn't want you to overthink it, so I lied." He gave me a half smile. "Why bother lying? Do you think I actually care?" I bit my lip, putting on my best heartbroken expression. "Sorry, it won't happen again." I turned and left before he could say another word. When I first asked him if he wanted to stand, and it was for one reason, he was hot. He was as wild as his name, and every inch of him hit my aesthetic perfectly. But honestly, after 2 years, even a face like that gets old. Plus, I was getting exhausted. At first they were respectful, and didn't call me much. Our meetings never lasted more than 30 minutes. Maybe I was too good at my job, because lately they were becoming increasingly clingy. With graduation approaching, managing my schedule was becoming a nightmare. I decided I'd stop playing with Jace after the season ended. My Uber dropped me off, and I saw the CEO standing tall under a dim streetlight. I immediately plastered a sweet smile on my face. I threw myself into his arms and used my fastest, most high-pitched voice. "I missed you so much. Did you miss me too, baby?" He looked down at me, his fingers tracing my features in the air. For a moment, the cold corporate machine showed a flicker of human emotion. "Very much," he said. Seriously? You mean you miss my sister? I added silently in my head. Fulton seemed like the hardest to handle, but he was actually the easiest. I clung to him, rubbing my face against his chest. He didn't pull away, but when I tried to grab his hand, he flinched. Every billionaire has a quirk, and Fulton was famous. He hated being touched, especially skin-to-skin contact. He was always covered up and had a collection of gloves at home. It took me 2 years just to get him to let me hug him through his clothes. Yet I had seen him holding Juno's hand, carefully tending to a small scratch she had gotten. I stepped back obediently and hooked my arm over his sleeve. So, why the sudden late-night gallery visit? He remained as tight-lipped as usual and LED me inside. That is where I found my answer. Juno had released a new series of paintings. The CEO stared at the canvas, lost in thought. I was so bored I stifled a yawn and looked around the room. It wasn't just this one piece. Almost the entire gallery was filled with my sister's work. Juno had boundless energy. Painting wasn't even a hobby for her. She just did it when she had a spare moment. The pieces were unfinished and, frankly, a bit of a mess. He probably never expected them to sell. The buyer was obviously Fulton. I looked at him and asked, "If I learned to paint, would you buy my work and hang it here?" His expression remained cold. "Don't compare yourself to her." Translation: You aren't worthy. I pushed further, acting stubborn. "I am not comparing. I just want someone to be that good to me." "Is that impossible?" A flash of annoyance crossed his eyes. He finally looked at me, his voice freezing. "If you don't want to be here, go home." I forced tears to well up in my eyes. "I am not being difficult. I just dive in. Get out." As expected, Fulton cut off my scripted nonsense and kicked me out. I scrambled away instantly. I was exhausted and had class the next morning. "Who has time to watch you pine over my sister? What a freak." Venmo. You received $15,000 from Fulton Price. What a brilliant, handsome, and generous man. I loved him so much. After that night, Fulton and Jace left me alone for a while. I was able to focus on studying with Silas, and my grades improved significantly. Once finals were over, I treated Silas to dinner at a high-end restaurant. I never expected to run into Jace there. He wasn't alone. He was with a woman, and they were being extremely intimate. I took the opportunity to snap several photos. The season was over, and I had my grades. I had been looking for an excuse to dump him, and here it was. When I got back, I showed him the photos. Heat and tea. Even flinch. He just lounged on his sofa, a mocking smile on his lips. "You can hang out with Silas, but I can't see other people." So he saw us. Then why didn't he say anything? I suddenly realized to the T. Love me. So of course he didn't care. He wasn't playing hard to get. He just was playing at all. As I was thinking, he stood up and loomed over me. "So, in what capacity are you asking me this? Are you my girlfriend? Do you love me? Do you want us to be official?" Hell no. A guy like him was fun for a fling, but a nightmare for a relationship. During our entire arrangement, Jace had never stopped flirting with others. One minute he'd be singing a soul-searching ballad to me, and the next he'd be whispering sweet nothings to some girl at a club. His devotion to my sister was pretty superficial, too. He called her his guiding star, but his bed was never empty. He acted like a gentleman in front of her, but was a total player behind her back. Still, I had to admit he had the charm to back it up. He was a rich kid, generous with his cash, and knew exactly how to make a woman feel special. All his exes spoke highly of him, except me. He always said hurtful things just to see my reaction. No matter what I did, he laughed, making me feel less like a stand-in and more like a stand-up comedian. I thought he just viewed me as entertainment, but his tone and the way he looked at me made me uneasy. Was this guy actually considering making me his girlfriend? My silence and clear resistance made his smile fade. His face turned stone cold. "Get out." He stared at me, his expression darkening before he suddenly burst out laughing. "I was just asking, did you actually take it seriously? You are a substitute. Don T. Get ahead of yourself." I breathed a sigh of relief. Then I played my part. I let my eyes turn red. "You always do this. Do you think I don't have a heart? Do you think I don't hurt?" Before he could respond, I fired off my prepared speech. "Jace, I regret this. I should never have gotten involved with you. I don't want to be a stand-in anymore. Don't call me again." I ran out of his house like I was sprinting for an Olympic gold medal. I was terrified I'd start laughing if I stayed 1 second longer. Billionaires have their quirks, and so do I. I loved pretending to be the tragic lead in a romance novel. I loved the feeling of being unwanted, and the thrill of the final breakup. It was such a rush. But the rush was temporary. Cleanup was going to be a pain. Jace was always the one to do the dumping. Since I beat him to it, wasn't he going to let it go easily? Silas was tutoring me at my place when Jace showed up to corner me. Silas was a workaholic, and he forced me to be one too. I originally only let him get close, so I could get help with my exams and competitions. But he took it so seriously that I felt guilty being lazy. Wasn't he doing this out of the goodness of his heart? Though he was arrogant and looked down on anyone he deemed intellectually inferior. I was part of that inferior group of average people. The only reason he endured my presence and praised my talent was because of my sister. He didn't want the sister of the campus legend to be a failure.
He was good, though.
In 2 years, he had helped me secure the top spot in my class and a fast track to grad school. After finishing a problem, he dazed off while looking at me again. I tilted my head to an angle that made me look more like Juno. His gaze was intense, completely at odds with his cold demeanor. The silence was shattered by a loud pounding on my door. I knew it was Jace. Silas asked who it was. I told him it was just a neighbor complaining about parking. He started to get up to check, but I practically pinned him down to keep him from moving. When I opened the door, I was met with Jace's furious, shadowed face. He sneered. "Taking your time, huh? Who is in there?"
Someone?
"You are hiding." He pushed past me like a wolf marking his territory. Silas, hearing the commotion, walked out of the bedroom. The two men locked eyes. Jace let out a sharp, angry laugh. My skin crawled. I took a quiet step back. Silas pulled me behind him. "Jace, where are your manners? This is breaking and entering." Jace tried to grab my arm, but Silas blocked him. Jace gripped Silas's wrist, his voice dripping with venom. "I am looking for my girlfriend. What is it to you?" Silas looked back at me. "Do you like him?" I instinctively prepared my tragic smile, but then I remembered Tevendi. I wasn't a stand-in anymore. I didn't owe Jace anything. I bit my lip and hid further behind Silas. The air in my tiny living room was thick with the scent of Jace's expensive, rain-soaked cologne and the heavy, clinical smell of Silas's freshly ironed linen shirt. Jace stood in the doorway, his chest rising and falling in sharp, jagged breaths. The collar of his leather jacket was damp, and his wild, dark hair clung to his forehead. He looked less like the untouchable playboy of the cities, elite clubs, and more like a predator that had been locked out of his own territory. "I am looking for my girlfriend," Jace repeated, his voice dropping an octave, vibrating with a dangerous, quiet malice. "What is it to you, Silas?" Silas didn't flinch. He didn't even adjust his glasses. He simply kept his arm extended, a physical barrier between Jace and me. To look at Silas, you would think he was analyzing a particularly dull chemical reaction. But I could see the slight tension in his jaw, the way his fingers twitched against his side. "She's not your girlfriend, Jace," Silas said, his voice as cool and calculated as a lecture on thermodynamics. "She is a person, and currently she is my student, working under my academic supervision." "You are trespassing." "Your student?" Jace let out a sharp, mocking laugh that bounced off the cheap drywall of my apartment. He took a step forward, his eyes locking onto mine over Silas's shoulder. "Is that what we're calling it now? Nira, tell him. Tell this stuck-up nerd who you belong to." I shrank back, clutching the edge of Silas's shirt. I let my shoulders tremble, slightly, squeezing out a tiny, breathless gasp. My mind, however, was running a cold diagnostic. Calculus homework, complete. Abstract algebra thesis, drafted. Grade point, average, secured at 3.98. As far as Silas was concerned, I had already gotten what I needed from him. As for Jace, the breakup had been initiated, but he was clearly refusing to sign the pink slip. If I let Jace drag me out now, I'd be stuck in his flashy Lamborghini, listening to another one of his dramatic, self-pitying monologues about how much he missed my sister, only for him to try and kiss me to forget. I was too tired for that. My feet ached from standing in the lab all afternoon. "Silas," I whispered, my voice sounding like spun honey dipped in tears. "Please." I told him it was over. I don't want to go with him. Silas's shoulders squared. The academic genius, who usually treated the human race as a collection of subpar intellects, seemed to swell with a sudden, protective righteousness. "You heard her," Silas said. "Leave, or I will call campus security and the police. I doubt your family's public relations team wants to handle a breaking and entering charge on your record this close to the quarterly board meeting." Jace's eyes darkened to a shade of stormy charcoal. He stared at me, his lip curling into a sneer that didn't quite reach his eyes that looked surprisingly raw, almost hurt. "You're really doing this, Nira?" Jace asked, his voice cracking slightly before. He masked it with a harsh laugh. "You're hiding behind him? The guy who treats you like a science project? The guy who doesn't even look at you unless he's..." Imagining Juno's face. The mention of Juno's name was like a splash of ice water. The room went dead. Silent. Silas didn't react, but his grip on my shoulder tightened. I kept my face buried in Silas's back, letting out a soft, pathetic sob. Inside, I was cheering. "Yes. Bring up Juno. Remind yourselves why you're both here. Keep the boundary clear." "Get out," Silas said, his tone dropping to a dangerous, freezing register. Jace stared at us for 3 agonizing seconds. He raised his hands in mock defeat, though his fists were clenched so tightly his knuckles were white. "Fine. Run to your tutor. Play the good little victim, Nira. But don't think for a second this is over. You think you can just turn me off like a switch? You're not her, but you're the only thing I have left." He turned on his heel and slammed the door behind him so hard the cheap-framed prints on my wall rattled. I waited until the sound of his heavy footsteps faded down the stairwell, followed by the distant, aggressive roar of a Lamborghini engine tearing down the street. Only then did I let go of Silas's shirt. I stepped back, immediately dropping the terrified prey posture. I wiped a non-existent tear from my cheek and sighed, stretching my neck. "Thank you, Silas," I said, my voice returning to its normal, practical tone. "He's been very difficult lately. I appreciate you stepping in." Silas turned around slowly. His eyes searched my face, scanning my expression with the intensity of a microscope. The cold, academic mask was back in place, but there was something else in his gaze, a lingering, turbulent curiosity. "You aren't scared," Silas noted flatly. "I was terrified," I lied smoothly, offering him a small, fragile smile. "My heart is still racing." Silas stepped closer, his shadow falling over me. He raised a hand, his fingers hovering just centimeters from my cheek, tracing the outline of my jaw without actually making contact. He dazed off, his eyes clouding over with that familiar, faraway look. He was seeing her. He was seeing Juno's sharp, confident smile, her fearless eyes. I didn't move. I kept my face perfectly still, serving as the canvas for his projection. "You look so much like her when you lie," Silas murmured, his voice barely a whisper. But she was never this fragile. She would have thrown a vase at his head. "I am not Juno," I said softly, playing my favorite role, the tragic, self-aware shadow. "I am just Nira, the weak, imperfect version." Silas's hand dropped. His eyes cleared, and a flicker of disgust crossed his features, disgust at himself, or perhaps at me for not being the real thing. "Go to sleep, Nira," he said coldly, turning back toward the table where his laptop and papers were scattered. "We have the final defense preparation tomorrow at 8. If you fail to secure the national scholarship, my recommendation will have been a waste of my time." "Of course," I said, bowing my head obediently. "I won't let you down." As Silas packed his things in silence and left, I locked the door behind him. The moment the lock clicked, I threw myself onto the sofa, let out a massive yawn and pulled out my phone. I opened my bank app. The balance was beautiful. Between Fulton's late night art appreciation fees, the allowance Jace poured into my accounts to keep me on call, and the academic stipend Silas helped me secure, I had amassed a small fortune. I rolled onto my back, staring at the ceiling. 2 years down, I thought. Juno comes back in 6 months. Just 6 more months of acting, and I can retire from the stand-in industry forever. The high-rise office of Price Holdings smelled of ozone, polished marble, and old money. Fulton Price sat behind a massive desk of petrified wood, his dark suit tailored to perfection. He was wearing his black leather gloves, his hands folded neatly over folder. He didn't look up when I entered. "You're late," he said. "The subway was delayed, Fulton," I said, stepping into the room. I didn't rush. I walked with a slight, hesitant drag to my step, looking down at my shoes. A pair of scuffed flats that contrasted sharply with the luxury of his office. "I tried to call, but your secretary said you were in a meeting." Fulton finally looked up. His gray eyes were like 2 pieces of chipped flint. He took in my appearance, my oversized sweater, my messy bun, the lack of makeup. I bought you 3 different cars, Nira, he said, his voice level and chilling. And a driver is on standby 24 hours a day. Why are you riding the subway? Because those cars aren't mine, I said, my voice trembling with just the right amount of melancholic pride. Every time I sit in them, I feel like a thief. I feel like I'm wearing a coat that belongs to someone else. Someone taller, more beautiful, someone who actually deserves to ride in luxury. Fulton's jaw tightened. He stood up, walking around the desk. He stopped 2 feet away from me. The sheer physical presence of the man was oppressive, but I had spent 2 years learning how to breathe under his gravity. We signed a contract, he said. You agreed to accept the maintenance. You agreed to live in the penthouse. I did, I whispered, looking up at him with wide, tear-filled eyes. Because I thought if I lived the way she lived, if I wore the things she wore, you might eventually look at me and see me, even just for a second. A flicker of something dark and painful crossed Fulton's face. He hated this. He hated when I forced him to confront the reality of what we were doing. He preferred the quiet, unspoken illusion, the moments where I sat in his gallery, silent and beautiful, allowing him to pretend that his lost queen had returned. Nira, he warningly muttered. But I can't do it anymore, Fulton, I sobbed quietly, taking a step back. I reached into my bag and pulled out a heavy set of keys, placing them on the edge of his desk. These are the keys to the penthouse. The keys to the Porsche are in the glove box. I can't live in her shadow anymore. It's too cold. I turned, hiding my face in my hands, and made a move toward the door. Stop, Fulton commanded. I didn't stop. I kept walking, counting the seconds in my head. 1, 2, 3. I felt a sudden, firm grip on my wrist. My breath caught, not out of acting, but out of genuine shock. I looked down. Fulton's bare hand, his pale, scarred fingers, devoid of the leather glove, was wrapped tightly around my wrist. Skin-to-skin contact. For a man who carried wet wipes in his pockets, who refused to shake hands with international prime ministers, who spent his life encased in protective layers of wealth and textile, this was the equivalent of a nuclear meltdown. His skin was burning hot. He was gripping me so tightly I could feel the pulse in his thumb. Fulton, I whispered, my eyes widening. Your glove. Fulton looked down at his own hand, his chest heaving. His expression was a volatile mix of horror, anger, and a desperate, raw hunger. He looked at where his fingers met my skin, his thumb twitching against my pulse point. Don't go, he rasped, his voice cracking. It was the first time in 2 years I had heard him lose his perfectly modulated corporate tone. I didn't tell you to leave. But I'm not Juno, I cried, letting the tears spill over my eyelashes, wetting my cheeks. Why do you want me here? You hate when I touch you. You hate when I talk. You only want a doll. You aren't her, Fulton said, his grip tightening further, pulling me a fraction of an inch closer. His gray eyes were wild, staring at my face, my eyes, my lips. I know you aren't her. Juno would never cry like this. She was too proud. She would have laughed in my face and walked out. Then let me go. No, he whispered, his face hovering close to mine. For a terrifying moment, I thought he was going to kiss me. The germophobic billionaire, the man who treated the world like a biohazard, was looking at me like I was the only clean thing left in existence. I don't want you to go. Just stay. Name your price. Nira. Whatever you want. I looked at him, my heart pounding a steady, rhythmic beat of cold calculation. He's breaking, I realized. The illusion is collapsing, and he's latching onto the substitute, because the substitute is the one who has been holding his hand through the dark for 2 years. I slowly pulled my wrist from his grip. He let me go, his hand trembling in the open air, looking lost. I don't want your money, Fulton, I said, putting on my most heartbreaking, tragic look of defeat. I want a soul, and you don't have one to give me. I turned and walked out of the office. The moment the heavy oak door shut behind me and I reached the elevator lobby, I leaned against the wall and let out a long, shuddering breath. My God, I thought, pulling out my phone. That was close. He almost kissed me. That would have violated Clause 4 of my personal boundaries. My phone buzzed in my hand. Venmo. You received $50,000 from Fulton Price. Memo, stay. I stared at the screen, a slow, brilliant smile spreading across my face. What a tragic, beautiful, and deeply misunderstood man, I whispered, tapping The transfer button to send the funds straight to my savings account. I will miss his psychological crises. While Jace was throwing tantrums and Fulton was having existential meltdowns, Silas Sterling was operating on a completely different frequency. The campus laboratory was quiet at 10 p.m. The only sound was the low hum of the centrifuge and the rhythmic clicking of Silas's keyboard. I sat at the neighboring desk, pretending to struggle with a complex set of biochemical data. I had already solved the sequence 3 hours ago, but I had deliberately left 3 errors in the intermediate steps. Silas? I called out, my voice soft, hesitant. I'm sorry to bother you, but the chromatography results aren't aligning with the hypothesis. I don't know what I did wrong. Silas didn't stop typing immediately. He finished his sentence, hit enter, and then turned his chair toward me. He looked exhausted, the dark circles under his eyes prominent, but his gaze was as sharp as a scalpel. Bring it here, he said. I stood up, carrying my tablet, and leaned over his shoulder. I made sure a strand of my hair brushed against his collar, and I breathed out a small, tired sigh. I've tried recalculating the peptide bonds, but the yield is still too low. I murmured, pointing at the screen. Silas leaned forward, his eyes scanning the numbers. He smelled of coffee and old paper. He reached out, his hand wrapping around mine to take the tablet. Your math is sloppy, Nira, he said, his voice quiet. You made a basic error in the multigram conversion on step 4, and your dilution ratio is off by a factor of 10. I'm sorry, I said, looking down, letting my shoulders slump. I guess I'm just tired. I can't seem to focus lately. Silas didn't let go of the tablet. He didn't look at the screen either. He was looking at my hand, which was still resting beneath his. You didn't make this mistake last week, Silas said. Your academic performance has been climbing exponentially. You are currently ranked first in the department. Why are you suddenly failing at basic chemistry? Maybe because I hesitated, biting my lip. Maybe because I'm realizing that no matter how hard I study, no matter how many papers I publish, the only reason I'm in this lab is because of my face. Silas's eyes narrowed. What are you talking about? The department chair told me yesterday, I said, letting a bitter, tragic laugh escape my lips. He said he was so glad to see Juno's brilliant legacy continuing through me. He said I have her genius. But I don't, Silas. I'm just a shadow. I'm just the girl you tutor because you miss the girl who used to sit in this chair. I tried to pull my hand away, but Silas's grip tightened. His fingers were cold, but his hold was unbreakable. Do you think I waste my time on shadows, Nira? Silas asked, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous whisper. I don't know what else to think, I said, looking him dead in the eye. You look at me, and you see her. Silas stood up, towering over me in the dimly lit lab. He took the tablet from my hand and tossed it onto the desk. He took a step closer, forcing me back against the lab bench. You're right, Silas said, his voice entirely devoid of emotion, yet burning with an intense, quiet fury. At first, I only let you in because you had her face. I wanted to see if the genetic material of the sibling would yield the same intellectual fruit. I wanted to see if I could recreate her. See, I whispered, tears welling in my eyes. I'm just an experiment. But do you want to know what I discovered, Nira? Silas continued, leaning in. So close his breath brushed my cheek. You aren't Juno. Not even close. I braced myself for the standard insult, but what he said next threw me entirely off script. Juno was brilliant, but she was predictable, Silas murmured, his eyes locking onto mine with a terrifying intensity. She was straightforward. She saw a problem, she solved it. She was like a perfectly designed machine. But you are a parasite. A beautiful, manipulative parasite. I froze. My breath hitched. You think I don't know? Silas let out a soft, chilling chuckle. I knew from the second month. You didn't make those errors in step 4 because you're tired, Nira. You made them because you wanted me to lean in. You wanted me to touch your hand. You wanted to see if you still had control over the cold-blooded genius. My heart did a genuine, non-acting flutter of panic. He knew. You played Jace like a fiddle, Silas whispered, his fingers gently tracing my collarbone, just above the fabric of my shirt. You make Fulton break his own rules. And you come in here, pretending to be the sweet, tragic little sister. Just so I will build your career for you. You are lazy, you are calculating, and you have absolutely no academic integrity. I swallowed hard, my mind racing to find a way out of this corner. If you think so poorly of me, why are you still tutoring me? Why did you get me the scholarship? Silas's hand moved to the back of my neck, his fingers tangling in my hair, pulling my head back, slightly, so I had to look at him. His eyes were dark, dilated, and entirely consumed by a dangerous obsession. Because Juno was boring, Silas whispered against my lips. She was too clean. But you are filthy, Nira. You are a beautifully complex system of lies and manipulation. And I have never found a puzzle I wanted to solve more than you. He leaned in, his lips brushing against mine, a light, teasing pressure that made my skin crawl with a strange mix of thrill and terror. Don't worry about Juno, Silas murmured. She's returning in a few weeks. But I've already forgotten what she looks like. Before he could kiss me fully, the alarm on my phone went off. 10:30 p.m. Time to go home. I violently pushed Silas away, gasping for air, playing the shocked, violated maiden. You're insane, Silas, I cried, grabbing my bag. I'm leaving. I'll see you tomorrow at 8, Nira, Silas said, his voice returning to its perfectly calm, academic tone as he sat back down in his chair. Don't be late. Your thesis won't write itself. I ran out of the lab, my heart hammering in my chest. Holy shit, I thought as I ran down the campus stairs. The nerd is the most dangerous one. He didn't just see through the act, he liked the act. The calendar on my wall had a massive red circle around the date, October 15th. Juno's flight was scheduled to land at JFK at 2 p.m. For the past week, the tension in the air had been palpable. Fulton had stopped calling, busy preparing some grand welcoming gesture, no doubt buying out another gallery or preparing a fleet of luxury cars. Jace had sent me a dozen angry, pleading texts, which I had ignored. Silas had been uncharacteristically quiet, sending me my final approved thesis with a simple note, "You're ready." They thought today was the day the queen returned to her throne and the shadow would quietly slip back into the dark. They were half right. The shadow was slipping away, but not into the dark. I stood in my completely empty apartment. The boxes had already been shipped to Zurich 3 days ago under a pseudonym. My bank account held a staggering $2.40 million, accumulated from 2 years of Fulton's apology, Venmos, Jace's guilt-trip shopping sprees, which I had promptly returned for cash refunds, and my academic stipends. My suitcase was packed. My passport was in my hand. I had secured a fully funded PhD position at the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology in Zurich, a position I had won using the flawless academic record Silas had helped me build, combined with the brilliant thesis I had edited myself. I looked at my reflection in the dusty mirror. No more oversized sweaters to mimic Juno's casual elegance. No more weeping, tragic tears. No more pretending to care about art galleries or video games. I took out my phone and opened a group chat I had created just for this occasion. I added Fulton, Jace, and Silas. Nira, to my dearest patrons, Juno's flight lands in 1 hour. The original is back, and the substitute is officially retiring. Fulton, thank you for the penthouses and the generous financial contributions. I hope you find a therapist who can help you with your germophobia without needing a physical proxy. Jace, thank you for the video games and the entertainment. Your singing is decent, but your acting is terrible. Try to stay out of other people's beds if you're going to play the tragic, devoted lover. Silas, thank you for the 4.0 GPA and the recommendation letter. You were right, I am a parasite. But I am a highly educated parasite now. Zurich is lovely this time of year. Please do not look for me. I have changed my number, blocked your accounts, and legally registered my new address under a corporate trust. It's been a pleasure doing business with you. Best, Nira. I hit send. Without waiting for a response, I pulled out the SIM card, snapped it in half, and tossed it into the empty trash can. I grabbed my suitcase, locked the door of the apartment, and walked down the stairs, humming a light, sweet tune. JFK International Airport was chaotic. Fulton Price stood in the VIP lounge, his eyes fixed on the arrival gate. He was wearing his gloves again, but his mind was in a state of utter disarray. His phone had buzzed 10 minutes ago with a message from an unknown number in a group chat. The message had been a brutal, cold execution of his illusions. Zurich is lovely this time of year. Fulton. A bright, loud voice broke through his thoughts. Juno walked through the gate. She was radiant, her hair blowing slightly in the drafts of the airport AC. She wore a bold red coat, her boots clicking loudly against the tile. She was a force of nature, carrying herself with an effortless, dominant grace. She walked straight to Fulton, a confident smile on her face. "Fulton, it's been so long. I heard you bought my entire collection. You really didn't have to." She reached out to hug him. Fulton stiffened. 2 years ago, he would have welcomed this touch. He would have felt his heart race at the sight of her. But as Juno's arms wrapped around him, he felt nothing. Her coat was too loud. Her scent, a sharp, expensive perfume, was too aggressive. It wasn't the soft, sweet, vanilla scent that had filled his office for the past 2 years. He stepped back, his gloved hands returning to his sides. "Welcome back, Juno," Fulton said, his voice flat, sounding hollow even to himself. "Is everything okay?" Juno asked, raising an eyebrow. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "I have," Fulton muttered, his eyes darting to the exit. He pulled out his phone, staring at the snapped group chat. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He didn't want Juno. He wanted the girl who had wept in his office, the girl who had forced him to take off his gloves just to keep her from leaving. He wanted the shadow. At the same time, Jace Wilder was sitting in his Lamborghini outside the terminal, his phone clutched in his hand. He had read the text 5 times. "Your singing is decent, but your acting is terrible." "That little bitch," Jace whispered, his knuckles turning white on the steering wheel. He looked at the entrance where Juno was supposed to emerge. He had spent 2 years writing songs about Juno, dreaming of the day she would return. But as he sat there, all he could think about was Neera's small, mocking smile when she beat his high score in Elden Ring. He thought about the way she had looked at him with those red, tear-filled eyes, saying she regretted ever getting involved with him. She had played him. She had used him for entertainment and cash, and then she had run away like an Olympic sprinter. "You think you can just dump me?" Jace roared, slamming his hand against the steering wheel. Nobody dumps Jace Wilder. He started the engine, ignoring Juno completely, and tore out of the airport parking lot, his mind consumed by a single, burning obsession: find Neera. In the university library, Silas Sterling sat in his private office, staring at a printout of Neera's final thesis. He had read the group chat message. He had also checked his system. Neera's student profile had been officially transferred to the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology. She had used his personal, highly prestigious recommendation letter to secure the transfer. Silas let out a low, dry laugh. "Brilliant," he murmured, his eyes shining with a terrifying, intellectual ecstasy. "She used my own signature to escape my lab." He stood up, walking to the window that looked out over the campus. Juno was back. He knew she would be visiting the department tomorrow, but the thought of meeting her filled him with a profound, crushing boredom. Juno was a solved equation. She was a known variable. Neera, however. Neera was a wild, beautiful, parasitic anomaly that had escaped his quarantine. "Zurich," Silas whispered, his fingers tracing the coordinates on his screen. "Let's see how long you can hide, my little parasite." 1 year later, the cafe in Zurich looked out over the crystal-clear waters of the Limmat River. The autumn air was crisp, and the distant Alps were capped with fresh snow. I sat at a corner table, wearing a cozy, cream-colored cashmere sweater, sipping a warm cup of hot chocolate. A textbook on advanced molecular modeling was open in front of me, but I was mostly just enjoying the view. My life in Zurich was perfect. I was the top doctoral student in my research group. My professors praised my unorthodox, highly strategic approach to problem solving. My bank account was healthy, and my apartment in the old town was charming and quiet. I was no longer Neera the substitute. I was Neera, the brilliant researcher. A shadow fell over my table. "You're hard to find when you actually try, Neera," a cold, familiar voice said. I didn't flinch. I slowly put down my cup and looked up. Fulton Price stood there, dressed in a long wool coat. He wasn't wearing his gloves. His hands were bare, red from the cold Swiss air. He looked thinner, his eyes hollower, but his gaze was locked onto me with a desperate, terrifying intensity. Before I could answer, a flashy, bright yellow Ferrari pulled up to the curb, its engine roaring, drawing angry looks from the quiet Swiss locals. The door swung open, and Jace Wilder stepped out. He looked wild, his hair messy, his leather jacket open. He strode over to the cafe, his eyes ignoring Fulton, entirely locking onto me. "Found you," Jace gasped, his chest heaving as if he had run all the way from New York. You think you're clever, Nira? Changing your name, hiding in Europe. She didn't hide very well. A quiet, dry voice chimed in. Silas Sterling stepped out from the shadow of the nearby archway. He carried a leather briefcase, his glasses catching the pale Swiss sunlight. He walked to the table, pulling out a chair, and sat down opposite me without asking. Her publishing record in the Swiss Journal of Biochemistry was a dead giveaway, Silas said, offering me a small, mocking smile. Though I must admit, your latest paper on peptide synthesis was highly impressive. I see you've finally learned how to do step 4 correctly. I looked at the three of them, the billionaire CEO, the rebellious playboy, the cold-blooded genius. They had traveled across an ocean, abandoned their lives, their businesses, and their research just to stand around my table in a quiet Swiss cafe. And Juno? Juno wasn't even a thought in their minds. I slowly closed my textbook. I didn't play the tragic victim. I didn't cry. I didn't put on my high-pitched, sweet voice. I leaned back in my chair, crossed my legs, and gave them a slow, brilliant, and deeply manipulative smile. The real Nira. Gentlemen, I said, my voice rich, smooth, and entirely self-assured. What a pleasant surprise. But I must warn you, the substitute is no longer accepting bookings. Fulton took a step closer, his bare hand reaching out, his fingers trembling as they rested on the edge of my wooden table. I don't want a substitute, Nira. I never did. I want you. You don't get to choose, Fulton, Jay snarled, stepping up beside him. She's coming back with me. I've written a whole album for her. Not for Juno. For her. Silas let out a soft, mocking laugh. Both of you are so incredibly tedious. She doesn't want your money, Fulton, and she certainly doesn't want your terrible songs, Jace. She wants intellectual stimulation. She wants a partner who can actually understand her mind. I watched them bicker, a quiet, joyful thrill bubbling up in my chest. They were trapped. I had woven a web of tragedy, guilt, and obsession so perfect that even when the original returned, they couldn't escape the shadow. I had turned their obsession with my sister into a monument to myself. Well, I said, standing up and picking up my bag. I tossed a few Swiss francs onto the table to cover my chocolate. It was wonderful catching up, but I have a lab seminar in 15 minutes, and unlike you three, I actually have to work for my future. I turned and walked away, my boots clicking against the cobblestone. Nira. Jace called out. Nira, wait. Fulton took a step forward. Silas simply stood up, his eyes shining with that familiar, obsessive spark as he prepared to follow me. I didn't stop. I walked into the crisp Swiss air, a soft, beautiful smile on my face. The game was over. I had won. And the best part? The sequel was going to be so much fun.